Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're tackling those tricky tactics that negotiators sometimes use. The ones that leave you feeling like you got played. We'll be using excerpts from the classic Getting to Yes as our guide. Imagine you're in the middle of a tough negotiation, the pressure's on.
And suddenly, the other side pulls out a move you didn't see coming, leaves you wondering, was that even legal?
Exactly. So how do we spot those tricky tactics?
Yeah.
And more importantly, how do we counter them without losing our cool or even worse, getting taken advantage of?
Well, those tricky tactics, they can be sneaky. Often they look like perfectly normal negotiation moves. But underneath, they're all about manipulation, getting the upper hand, not finding a solution that works for everyone.
So it's like they're reading from a different playbook. But luckily, Getting to Yes throws us a lifeline. It helps us decode these tactics, understand what's really going on.
Exactly. The first step is recognizing these tactics for what they are. Because once you can spot the signs, the subtle cues, you're already in a better position.
Like learning the tell of a poker player. You see that little eyebrow twitch and you know they're bluffing.
Precisely. Now, many people, when faced with these tricky tactics, they either try to ignore them, hoping they'll just go away.
Or, and I've been guilty of this myself, they fight fire with fire. Give them a taste of their own medicine.
Right, which can be tempting, for sure. But think about it. Did appeasing Hitler work out so well? Mirroring bad behavior, whether it's on the world stage or in a negotiation, it rarely leads to a positive outcome.
So we need a different approach. Getting to Yes calls it principled negotiation. Sounds a bit, I don't know, too civilized for a cutthroat negotiation, maybe.
Not at all. Think of it as taking control. Instead of letting the other side dictate the terms, the rules of the game, you're stepping up and saying, hold on, we're going to play fair. You're negotiating the very rules of engagement.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? How do we implement this principled negotiation when the pressure is on?
Well, getting to yes breaks it down into a three-step method. First, you have to recognize the tactic. Knowledge is power, right? Once you can spot the signs of deception, psychological pressure, or positional pressure, you're a step ahead.
Okay, so it's like learning the enemy's code. We can decipher their signals and understand what they're really up to.
Exactly. Let's say you're in a business negotiation and the other side throws out a statistic that just seems too good to be true. Could be they're deliberately trying to mislead you.
Oh, I've been there. Like that time a contractor quoted me a ridiculously low price, and then bam! Hit me with all these hidden fees later. Felt like I'd walked into a trap.
Exactly. And that's where that healthy skepticism comes in. You don't have to accuse them of lying outright, but do your due diligence, ask for sources, double-check their claims.
Got it. So vigilance is key. We spot the tactic. Now what?
Step 2. Address it directly. Don't let it fester. Bring it out into the open, but do it without attacking them personally.
So instead of saying, hey, you're trying to pull a fast one, it said,
Something like, I'm a little confused. That statistic seems to contradict the industry data I've seen. Can you clarify where you got that information?
right, it's calling out the discrepancy, not the person.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how often simply raising the issue can be enough. They might back down. Maybe they didn't even realize they were using a tricky tactic. Or they might be embarrassed once it's exposed.
And if they double down, then what?
That brings us to step 3. Question the tactic's legitimacy. This is where we shift the focus. We're not just arguing about the price of, let's say, that piece of land anymore.
We're questioning the very tactic they're using, like why they suddenly brought in a partner who's demanding a higher price.
Exactly. You're not attacking the partner. You're addressing the tactic itself. You might ask, is it really productive to have a third party dictating the terms of this deal?
It's like saying, nice try, but I'm not playing that game.
Exactly. You're taking back control, setting the stage for a more honest and productive discussion.
This is already making me feel more empowered. But getting to yes doesn't just give us a framework, right? They get into the nitty-gritty, the specific tactics people use.
They do. And they give real-world examples, which makes it much easier to relate to.
Okay, give me some of the juicy details. What kind of tricky tactics are we talking about?
Well, they categorize these tactics into 3 main groups: deliberate deception, psychological warfare, and positional pressure.
Wow, that sounds intense. Okay, let's start with deliberate deception. What does that look like in practice?
Could be as blatant as phony facts, like that inflated statistic we talked about earlier, or it could be more subtle. Maybe they're being ambiguous about their authority, pretending to have more decision-making power than they really do.
Ugh, I hate that. It's like playing a game of telephone where you never get to talk to the person who's actually making the decisions.
Exactly. And then there's dubious intentions where they agree to something, but you get this gut feeling they're not going to follow through.
Like when a client promises they'll sign a contract any day now, but keeps coming up with excuses to delay. Definitely makes my spidey sense tingle.
Perfect example. Getting to yes suggests building in safeguards, contingent agreements, things like that. You could say, hey, I understand you're busy. How about we set a firm deadline? And if it's not met, we can revisit the terms.
Okay, so we've got to be cautious, not just take everything at face value. But how do we counter deliberate deception overall? Do we need to become lie detectors?
Not necessarily. The key is due diligence. Don't just accuse them, but verify. Ask for evidence, get things in writing, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
Okay, trust but verify, especially in high-stakes situations. All right, let's move on to psychological warfare. I'm already getting stressed just thinking about it.
These tactics are designed to make you uncomfortable, throw you off balance, so you're more likely to give in. A classic one is creating a stressful environment.
Oh yeah, like making you wait for hours in a stuffy room or bombarding you with technical jargon that you barely understand.
Exactly. Or maybe they schedule the meeting for a time they know you'll be at your weakest, like right before a big deadline.
Trying to exploit our vulnerability so we're more susceptible to their demands.
Precisely. And then there are personal attacks, those subtle digs at your experience, your appearance, anything to make you doubt yourself.
Ugh, that's the worst. So how do we handle this kind of psychological pressure? Do we need to become Zen masters?
It definitely helps to stay calm and focused. But even more importantly, just recognize what's happening. Don't take it personally. Don't let their behavior dictate yours.
So if they're being aggressive or rude, we don't have to stoop to their level.
Exactly. Remember, you're in control of your behavior. You can always call for a break, reframe the conversation, or even walk away if you need to.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered deliberate deception and psychological warfare.
Yeah.
What's the third category?
Positional pressure tactics. This is where they try to box you in, make you feel like you have no choice but to accept their demands.
So it's about limiting our options, making us feel trapped.
Exactly. They might refuse to negotiate at all, saying take it or leave it. Or they might set preconditions that put you at a disadvantage right from the start.
Oh, I hate that. It's like trying to reason with a brick wall.
Right. Another tactic is using extreme demands, maybe even escalating them as the negotiation goes on.
So they start with an outrageous offer, hoping to lower our expectations, and then make their final offer seem reasonable by comparison.
Exactly. It's a classic manipulation tactic.
So how do we counter these positional pressure tactics? Do we need to become master strategists?
It's less about being a master strategist and more about staying focused. Remember your own goals, your own interests, and don't get distracted by their attempts to control the negotiation.
So it's about keeping our eyes on the prize, not letting them dictate the terms of the game.
Exactly. And remember, you always have options. You can walk away, counter their demands, or find creative solutions that meet both of your needs.
Getting to yes calls it negotiating within a negotiation. It's not just about the terms of the deal itself. It's about negotiating the very rules of engagement.
That's a great way to put it. We have more power than we realize to shape the process. We can create a more level playing field.
This is all starting to feel a lot less intimidating. These tricky tactics are starting to seem less like insurmountable obstacles and more like challenges we can overcome with the right mindset and strategies.
That's the spirit. Getting to yes is all about empowering us, not just to win, but to find solutions that truly work for everyone.
And doing it in a way that builds trust, not destroys it.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, negotiation shouldn't be a battle. It should be a collaboration, a way to find common ground and build mutually beneficial relationships. And it's not just about knowing our own BTNA. It's also about understanding the other side's BTNA. What are their alternatives? What's their walkaway point?
So we do our homework, try to figure out their options. The more we know, the better we can anticipate their moves.
Exactly. It's like gathering intel before a big game. The more you know about your opponent, the better prepared you are.
Makes sense. So BTNAs are key. What else should we be thinking about when we prepare for a negotiation?
Well, think about the logistics. Where will the negotiation take place? Who's going to be there? Even something as simple as the agenda can have a big impact.
I hadn't thought about that. Those little details really matter, huh?
They do. Think about it. If you're negotiating in their office, they're in their comfort zone, they might feel more in control.
Right. Or if it's in a public place, you might feel pressure to, I don't know, not make a scene.
Exactly. It's about being mindful of the environment. Choose a setting that's conducive to a productive and fair negotiation.
Okay, so location matters. What about timing? Does that play a role too?
Oh, absolutely. Timing can be a huge factor in a negotiation. When you schedule the meeting, how much time you allot, even when you make certain decisions, all of that can affect the outcome.
So it's not just about what we say, but when we say it.
Exactly. For instance, imagine you're negotiating a salary. It might be beneficial to have that conversation after you've gotten a competing offer.
Oh, I see. Gives you more leverage, right?
Exactly. Or let's say you're buying a house, you might want to make your offer when the seller's under pressure to move quickly.
It's about being strategic, using timing to our advantage.
Precisely. But remember, even with the best preparation, there will always be surprises. Be ready to adjust, think on your feet.
That's the truth. Okay, so we've covered preparation. Knowing our BTNA, the other side's BTNA, being mindful of location and timing. Anything else we should keep in mind before we go into a negotiation?
Getting to yes really emphasizes the importance of focusing on interests, not positions. It's about understanding the underlying needs and motivations of both sides.
Right, but what if the other side just digs in their heels, refuses to budge from their position? How do we even begin to uncover those underlying interests?
That's where the art of asking the right questions comes in. It's like peeling back layers of an onion. You have to dig a little deeper.
Okay, I like the analogy. So how do we start peeling? What kind of questions should we be asking?
Instead of arguing about their position, try asking open-ended questions about why they're taking that stance. Help me understand why that's so important to you, or what concerns would you have if we did things differently?
So instead of saying, no way, that price is ridiculous, I might say, I'm struggling to understand how that price aligns with the current market. Could you explain your thinking?
Exactly. By being genuinely curious, asking questions in a respectful way, you often uncover valuable information. You start to see their perspective, their motivations.
It's like we're playing detective negotiator at the same time.
Exactly. And once those interests are out in the open, you can start looking for creative solutions, solutions that address their needs, even if it means moving away from those initial positions.
I think the big takeaway here is that negotiation isn't about winning or losing. It's about finding a solution that works for both sides.
Absolutely. And it requires a shift in mindset. It's not about digging in our heels, defending our position at all costs. It's about being curious, open to different possibilities, and remembering the other side, they're not the enemy. They're a partner. We have to work together to find that solution.
Which brings us back to another point. Getting to yes makes building a strong working relationship with the other side. Now, that might seem counterintuitive, right?
It might seem like keeping things strictly business would give us an advantage.
Exactly. Like, wouldn't we be more likely to get what we want if we kept a professional distance?
It might seem that way, but in reality, building that relationship can be one of your strongest assets in a negotiation.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that. How does a good relationship actually help us get a better deal?
Well, when you put in the effort to build rapport, establish trust, show some empathy, you create a much better environment, one that's more conducive to collaboration, to problem solving.
So even when we're facing someone who's being tough, maybe even a little unreasonable, it's still worth taking the time to connect on a human level.
Absolutely. Getting to yes encourages us to see the other side not as adversaries, but as colleagues, working together towards a common goal.
That's a powerful way to look at it. Any practical tips on how to build that rapport, especially in the middle of a tough negotiation?
Definitely. Start by finding common ground. Could be a shared interest, a similar background, even just a sense of humor.
So even something as simple as discovering you both root for the same team can help?
Exactly. It breaks down those walls, makes the atmosphere more relaxed, more collaborative. And then focus on showing empathy.
Empathy. That sounds tough, especially when the other side is being difficult. How do we do that without compromising our own position?
Empathy doesn't mean agreeing with them or condoning their behavior. It's about trying to see things from their perspective, understanding their motivations, their concerns.
So it's about acknowledging their feelings, even if we don't share them.
Exactly. And getting to yes suggests a really simple but effective technique for demonstrating empathy. Active listening.
Oh yeah, active listening. That's a classic communication skill.
Yeah.
It's about really focusing on what the other person is saying, right?
Right. Not just their words, but their tone, their body language. And then reflect back what you've heard, make sure you understand their perspective.
So it's not just about waiting for our turn to talk. It's about actively engaging with what they're saying,
Yes.
trying to see the world through their eyes.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful. It shows them that you're genuinely interested, that you're committed to finding a solution that works for both of you.
This is really making me think differently about negotiation. It's not just about being tough and assertive. It's about being a good communicator, a good listener, almost like being a psychologist in a way.
You're right. It takes more than just tactics and strategies. It also requires emotional intelligence.
So how do we find that balance?
Uh-huh.
How do we stand up for ourselves, but also be respectful and understanding towards the other side?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Getting to yes calls it being principled, standing firm on your values, but not being rigid. Being firm but fair.
And one of their big points is the importance of separating the people from the problem.
Oh, that's so important. Especially when emotions run high, it's easy to get personal, to see the other person as the enemy.
It's human nature, right?
Yeah.
We get defensive when we feel attacked. But like they say in getting to yes, those emotional reactions can actually hurt our chances of reaching a good agreement.
Absolutely. When we make it personal, it's hard to see the situation clearly, to find those win-win solutions.
So we have to remember, the person across the table, they're not our enemy. They're just another person with their own needs and perspectives.
Exactly. We can disagree with their ideas, their tactics, without attacking them personally.
It's about finding that balance, being assertive but respectful.
Exactly. And getting to yes offers some really helpful advice on how to do that. They talk about active listening, which we already discussed.
Right, really tuning in to what the other person is saying.
Exactly. And they also talk about the importance of speaking for yourself, not for them.
So instead of saying, you're just trying to take advantage of me, I should say something like, I feel like this offer isn't fair given my contributions to the project.
Exactly. Use I statements. Express your own needs and feelings directly without making assumptions about what they're thinking or feeling.
Because when we put words in their mouth, it just leads to misunderstandings. And it's less effective because we end up arguing against them instead of advocating for ourselves.
Exactly. And it's more likely to make them defensive. So focus on being clear, direct, but not attacking.
And focus on the future, not the past.
Exactly. Instead of dwelling on past disagreements, focus on finding a solution that works going forward.
And be willing to apologize if you've done something wrong, if you've offended them in some way.
A sincere apology can be incredibly powerful. It can repair damage and build trust.
It shows them that you're willing to take responsibility for your actions, which can go a long way in a negotiation.
Absolutely. So as we continue exploring getting to yes, let's remember, negotiation is about more than just tactics. It's about human connection.
And building those connections takes trust, respect, a willingness to listen and understand.
So in your next negotiation, remember, separate the people from the problem.
Be assertive but respectful, listen actively, and speak for yourself.
And always remember, building a good working relationship can make all the difference in the world.
Now, getting to yes also dives into the power of options in a negotiation.
You mean having more than one way to approach the situation, more than just my way or the highway?
Exactly. When we get stuck on a single solution, it limits our ability to find an agreement that truly works for both sides.
It's like going to a restaurant and finding out they only serve one dish. You might not even like it, but you've got no other choice.
I see what you mean. So getting to yes is saying, don't limit yourself. Open up to more possibilities.
Exactly. Embrace the power of brainstorming. Come up with as many creative options as you can.
So the goal isn't to find the perfect solution right away. It's to broaden our horizons, explore different possibilities.
Exactly. The more options you have, the better your chances of finding an agreement that really works for everyone.
Makes sense. And getting to yes has some specific advice on brainstorming, right?
They do. They talk about separating the act of inventing from the act of judging. Don't shut down ideas too early.
So it's okay to throw out even those crazy out-of-the-box ideas.
Absolutely. You never know where those might lead. Sometimes the most creative solutions come from unexpected places.
They also talk about looking beyond the specific points of disagreement, right? Trying to broaden the scope of the negotiation.
Right. Instead of getting bogged down in that one sticking point, look for other areas of agreement. Maybe there are trade-offs you haven't considered.
It's like looking at the whole chessboard, not just the one square where the conflict is happening.
Exactly. And they give some great examples of how to do this, like unbundling the issues.
Unbundling, what does that mean?
Instead of trying to tackle this big, complex problem all at once, break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces.
So instead of arguing over one big contract, we might create separate agreements for different aspects of the deal.
Exactly. And that can help you find areas of agreement, even if you're still working through some sticking points. It builds momentum, creates trust.
I like that. It's a more collaborative approach.
Right. And they also talk about bridging solutions, finding creative ways to link those interests that seem incompatible at first.
So finding that sweet spot where both sides can get at least some of what they want.
Exactly. And it takes creativity, flexibility, a willingness to think outside the box.
They had that great example about the husband and wife arguing over vacation plans.
Oh, right. The husband wants to go camping in the mountains. The wife wants to relax on the beach.
Classic dilemma. So how did they bridge that gap?
They brainstormed, thought outside the box, ended up renting a cabin on a lake, got to enjoy the peace of nature, and be near the water for swimming and sunbathing.
A perfect example of how creative thinking can lead to a win-win.
Exactly. So don't limit yourself. Explore all the options. Brainstorm. Think creatively. You might be surprised at what you come up with.
Okay, so we've talked about interests, options, relationships. Getting to yes also emphasizes the importance of objective criteria. Can you remind us what that means and why it's so important?
Ah, yes. Objective criteria. It's like the anchor that keeps the negotiation from floating away on a sea of emotions and opinions.
Because when we base our arguments on solid evidence, on facts, it's harder for the other side to just dismiss what we're saying.
Right. It takes the focus off of personal feelings and puts it on something more concrete, more impartial.
And they give tons of examples of objective criteria in the book. Things like market value, scientific research, industry standards.
It's like having a whole team of experts backing you up.
I remember that example of the salary negotiation.
Oh, yes. The person asking for a raise, instead of just saying, I deserve more money, they came prepared with data, showed what other people in similar roles were making.
Made it a lot harder for the employer to argue with that.
Exactly. It shifted the conversation from, I think, to, here's the data.
And it builds trust. It shows the other side that we're not just making things up. We're serious about finding a fair solution.
Absolutely. It creates a more level playing field. But you might be wondering, where do we find this objective criteria?
Yeah, it's one thing to say use data, but how do we actually find it?
Preparation. That's where it all starts. Do your research, talk to experts, gather that data, come to the table ready to back up your claims.
So no relying on gut feelings or hunches. We need hard evidence.
Right. And be open to their objective criteria, too. What they bring to the table might reveal something you hadn't considered.
So if they come with their own set of data, we don't just ignore it. We look at it, see if it can help us reach a better agreement.
Exactly. It's about being open-minded. Negotiation is a learning process. We can always learn something new, even from the other side.
This is starting to feel less like a battle and more like a collaborative investigation.
That's a great way to put it. We're all searching for the truth, trying to find the best solution.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. But what about those times when the other side just plays hardball? When they seem determined to win at all costs? Does getting to yes address that?
They do. They have a whole section on dealing with those hard bargainers, those negotiators who are less interested in finding a win-win and more interested in getting their way.
Okay, I definitely need to hear this. What do they say about dealing with those tough negotiators?
The first thing they emphasize is that you always have a choice in how you respond. You don't have to play their game.
So we don't have to get sucked into that negative spiral.
Exactly. You have options. You can engage, you can disengage, you can even try to change the game completely.
I like that. We're not just reacting, we're in control of our own responses.
Exactly. And they offer some specific strategies for how to do that.
Okay, let's dive into some of those strategies. What's their advice for handling someone who's constantly making threats? You know, those do this or else types.
Their first piece of advice is don't react emotionally. Threats are designed to trigger fear or anger, and that can cloud your judgment, make you more likely to give in to something you shouldn't.
So it's like that old saying, don't let them see you sweat. Stay calm, even when they're trying to intimidate us.
Exactly. Take a deep breath, remember your BBATNA, and don't let them dictate your behavior.
Right. Easier said than done sometimes, but I get it. But what if they actually follow through on their threats? What then?
That's where having a strong BTNA is crucial. If you know you have other options, you're not afraid to walk away. Their threats lose their power.
It's like having that safety net.
Exactly. And also ask yourself, are their threats even credible? Are they really willing to walk away from the deal, or are they bluffing?
So it's like a poker game. We have to read the other player, figure out if they're holding a good hand or just trying to scare us.
Exactly. And if their threats are credible and they're not willing to negotiate fairly, then you have to be prepared to walk away.
Okay, makes sense. So we've talked about threats. What about those negotiators who just wear you down with constant demands, constant pressure to give in?
Getting to yes calls that the salami tactic. They keep slicing away at your position bit by bit until you've given away more than you intended.
Ugh, I've been there. It's exhausting, and before you know it, you've compromised way too much.
Right, so you have to stop the bleeding early on, set clear boundaries, make it clear what you're willing to concede and what you're absolutely not willing to budge on.
So it's about drawing that line in the sand and not letting them cross it, no matter what.
Exactly. And they also suggest using what they call the if-then technique.
If then, what's that?
You basically say, if you're willing to do this, then I'm willing to do that.
So we're linking our concessions to their concessions. Creates a sense of fairness, reciprocity.
Exactly. And another crucial point, don't give in too quickly. Make them work for those concessions.
So no just rolling over and playing dead. We make them earn it.
Exactly. Because when they have to put in the effort, they're more likely to value what they get.
It sends the message that we're not pushovers, that we're serious about getting a fair deal.
Exactly. And it shows them that you respect yourself and your own interests. Okay, so we've talked about threats, salami tactics, not giving in too easily. Any other strategies getting to yes suggests for dealing with tough negotiators? Yes, they encourage us to use objective criteria to our advantage.
So it's about bringing in those facts and figures, those independent standards, to ground the negotiation.
Exactly. When you can point to market value, industry benchmarks, things like that, it's harder for them to justify unreasonable demands.
It's like having a referee there to make sure the game is played fairly.
That's a great way to put it. And they also suggest using the power of silence.
Silence. How does that help?
Sometimes the best response to a tough tactic is to just say nothing. Let them finish their rant and then calmly restate your position.
So we don't get pulled into their emotional whirlwind.
Exactly. And that silence can actually be really powerful. It creates a sense of anticipation. It can make them feel uncomfortable.
I can see that. When someone just goes quiet, you start to wonder what they're thinking, what they're going to do next.
Exactly. And that can push them to reconsider their position or at least to be more open to compromise.
Interesting. So we've got objective criteria, the power of silence. Anything else?
Their last piece of advice, and it's a big one, is to be prepared to walk away.
So knowing our BATNA and being willing to use it if we have to.
Exactly. Sometimes the best deal is no deal.
I think that's so important to remember. It's easy to get so focused on winning that we lose sight of whether the deal is even good for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes walking away is the bad way to protect yourself.
So if the negotiation is going nowhere, if the other side isn't negotiating fairly, we have to be willing to say, enough is enough.
Exactly. Negotiation should be about finding solutions that work for both sides. If they're not interested in that, if they're only interested in winning, then it's probably not a negotiation worth having.
Okay, this has been really eye-opening. I'm starting to feel a lot more confident about handling those tough negotiators. But before we move on, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier. We've been talking about how to be assertive, strategic, but I want to make sure we're not encouraging people to be unethical.
That's a really important point, and getting to yes addresses that directly. They emphasize that principled negotiation is about being effective and ethical.
So it's not about winning at any cost. It's about getting what we want while still being fair and honest.
Exactly. And they offer some specific guidelines for staying on the right side of that ethical line.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are those guidelines?
First and foremost, they emphasize honesty and transparency.
So no lying, cheating, or stealing to get ahead.
Exactly. While it's okay to be strategic, to be clever, you should never resort to deception or misrepresentation to gain an advantage.
That makes sense. But what about those situations where the other side is being dishonest? Do we have to just sit there and take it?
Getting to yes strongly advises against fighting fire with fire. They argue that even when the other side is playing dirty, we should hold ourselves to a higher standard.
So we don't stoop to their level, even if it feels tempting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about maintaining your own integrity. And in the long run, that's more likely to lead to a truly sustainable agreement.
They also talk about the importance of being respectful, even when we disagree, right?
Absolutely. Respect is essential for building trust and rapport.
So no name-calling, no personal attacks, no belittling their ideas.
Right. Even when you're frustrated, treat them with respect. It's not about them as a person, it's about the issues.
And they also emphasize the importance of keeping our commitments.
Absolutely. If you make a promise, keep it. Your word is your bond, and breaking that trust can damage your reputation and make future negotiations much harder.
So it's about being reliable, being someone people can count on.
Exactly. And getting to yes provides a really helpful framework for thinking about ethical commitments.
I'm intrigued. What's the framework?
They suggest asking yourself 3 questions before making any commitment.
Okay, what's the first question?
Is this commitment consistent with my values? Does it feel right? Does it align with your sense of right and wrong?
So we have to check in with our own moral compass.
Exactly. If something feels off, it probably is. The second question is, can I realistically keep this commitment?
So no overpromising, making pledges we can't actually deliver on.
Right. Be honest with yourself about your capabilities. And the third question is, what are the potential consequences of this commitment?
So thinking through the long-term implications of our decisions.
Exactly. By asking yourself these questions, you can make sure your commitments are both ethical and sustainable.
This is great. It's a good reminder that negotiation is about more than just getting a good deal. It's about doing it the right way.
Absolutely. And getting to yes shows us how to achieve both.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from tricky tactics to the importance of preparation, building relationships, and using objective criteria. But I want to circle back to one more point, the importance of separating the people from the problem.
Ah, yes. That's such a core principle of getting to yes. It's so crucial for staying effective and sane in those tough negotiations.
Especially when you're dealing with those hard bargainers who try to use personal attacks, those emotional jabs, to throw you off.
It's easy to get caught up in that, to take it personally, and that's when we make mistakes.
So how do we actually do that? How do we separate the people from the problem, especially when things are getting heated?
Well, remember those techniques we talked about? Focusing on interests, not positions?
Right, trying to understand what's driving the other side, what's really important to them.
Exactly. And by focusing on interests, we can often find solutions that meet those needs, even if it means moving away from our initial positions.
And then there's active listening,
Right. Really paying attention to what they're saying, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
trying to see things from their perspective, acknowledging their feelings, even if we don't agree with them.
Exactly. And speaking for yourself, not for them.
So instead of saying you just want to take advantage of me, we should say, I'm concerned that this offer doesn't reflect the value I bring to the table.
Perfect. Use those I statements to express your own needs, your own feelings.
Because it's less likely to put them on the defensive, and it's more likely to get our point across clearly and effectively.
Exactly. And focus on moving forward.
So instead of getting stuck in the past, dwelling on old disagreements, we focus on finding a solution that works for both of us now.
Exactly. And if we've made a mistake, if we've offended the other person, we should be willing to apologize.
Because a sincere apology can really go a long way in repairing a damaged relationship.
Absolutely. It shows humility and a willingness to take responsibility, which can be very disarming in a negotiation.
Okay, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I just want to remind everyone, negotiation is not just about tactics and strategies, it's about relationships.
And those relationships are built on trust, respect, and genuine understanding. And those relationships are built on trust, respect, and a willingness to listen and understand.
So as you go into your next negotiation, remember to separate the people from the problem.
Be assertive but respectful, listen actively, and speak for yourself.
And always remember that a good working relationship can make all the difference in finding a solution that works for everyone involved.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, getting to yes emphasizes that negotiations should be about collaboration, not combat.
It's about finding those creative solutions that benefit both sides, not about trying to outsmart or overpower the other person.
Exactly. It's about problem solving, working together to find a fair and lasting agreement.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive, but there's one more point from getting to yes I want to highlight. The idea that negotiation isn't just about reaching an agreement. It's also about shaping the process of negotiation itself.
Oh, that's a really interesting point. And it's a theme that comes up again and again in the book. We have more control over the process than we might think.
It's like we're not just players in the game, we're also the referees, setting the rules.
Exactly. We can set the ground rules, the tone. We can even influence the other side's behavior.
And that seems especially important when we're dealing with those tricky negotiators who are trying to, well, manipulate the process to their advantage.
Absolutely. By understanding those tactics, by being proactive, we can level the playing field.
I remember some of the examples they gave in the book. Like, if the other side is trying to stall, drag things out, we can set our own deadlines.
Right. Make it clear that time is of the essence. Or, let's say they want to negotiate in a public setting where they feel more powerful. You can always suggest moving to a private location.
So we can have a more honest, open conversation.
Exactly. It's about being assertive but not aggressive. Taking control, but not being controlling.
Right. And remembering that the process itself, it's just as important as the outcome.
Absolutely. A fair and respectful process is more likely to lead to a fair agreement, one that everyone can live with.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage our listeners to think about not just what they want to achieve in their next negotiation, but how they want to achieve it.
It's about being intentional, strategic, and always sticking to your principles.
And remembering that negotiation doesn't have to be a battle. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone.
Well said. And getting to yes gives us the tools we need to do just that.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Big thanks to our expert for sharing these incredible insights from getting to yes.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has equipped you to tackle your next negotiation with confidence and skill. Remember, you have the power to create win-win solutions and build stronger relationships. So go out there and negotiate like a pro.